Koji Takeda says, your English is really easy for me to understand. Do you speak super clearly for us, or you speak like that all the time? One thing that I remember very clearly from spending 4 years in China teaching English without going back to the United States and even really talking to my family that much, we mostly talked by email, frankly, is when they met me, again, after 4 years, they said, you speak kind of differently. You speak really, really clearly. You're really pronouncing things very clearly. Why are you talking like that? And I think to an extent I had got used to just saying things very clearly, saying what I mean, not very slowly, but maybe a little more slowly, and trying to enunciate so that people can understand. I think I had got so used to doing that with students that I tended to do it with everybody. So I actually think I changed a little bit as a result of becoming an English teacher. And I know I'm not the only one who's experienced that. I've talked to a lot of English teachers, and many of them have told me the same thing. Now, I don't think it's much. I don't think it's a huge amount of change that I've made from then to now. I think it's very small. And if you had heard me talk 10 years ago, you would have said maybe the same thing, if I were talking to you. But if I were not, you might have said, wait a second, what are you talking about? And let me explain another piece of that. Understanding someone, Koji, is not only about their speed and not only about how much they enunciate. That is probably 15% of understanding. In fact, if someone is saying exactly what I'm saying, but saying it much more clearly and blended together, much more quickly and blended together, you would probably have about the same level of comprehension. Maybe a little bit less. Now, what's the other piece? What's the other 75%? You might have heard me say this before, but the other 75%, and a much more important part, it's the reason you don't understand native English speakers, and that is references. That is, when I'm speaking with my brothers or I'm speaking with other native English speakers, I'm going to naturally pop out with local idioms, expressions, references to movies and film, things in our culture that I know that they know, that they know that I know. And it's those references, those idioms, those expressions, those things that are in the culture that we both know, those shared things, that makes it difficult for people who aren't in the culture to understand. I understand every single word you just said, but what the hell are you talking about? Right? That's the question. Well, he speaks clearly, but I don't know what he's saying. That's because he's referencing things that you don't know, because you didn't grow up in that country. And that's the fact. And so if you want to get exposure to that, you have to expose yourself to it. One of the things that really blows my mind and drives me crazy is someone says, I don't understand all of the references that people make to American culture. And I say, do you read books? No. Do you play video games? No. Do you watch a lot of English TV shows? Sometimes, but no, not really. Do you read articles online? No, not really. Do you listen to podcasts? No, not really. Well, then what? Of course. Of course. How could you expect anything else unless you jump into the swimming pool of the culture and start swimming around, start playing English video games, start watching regular TV shows on a regular basis that you enjoy, or movies, start reading articles online, start listening to podcasts, start reading to books or reading to books. What is that? Reading books or listening to audiobooks. How can you expect to get those references? So don't plan anything. Don't get ready for it. Don't say, okay, let me make a schedule and then I'm going to get into that stuff. Don't do any of that stuff. It's a waste of time. Just immediately, starting in 5 minutes, jump into it. Find what you like and stick with it. Find the parts that make you happy, that you enjoy. And you're going to start picking up those things in the culture. You're going to start picking up the references because you saw that TV show, because you played that video game, because you read that article, because you listened to that podcast. You will know more things about the English language culture. It's extremely important. And when I hear people say, why? So often, it just drives me crazy because it's to me, it seems so obvious, right? But it's important. Anyway, it's important. Okay, it's very, very important. One thing I want to mention, though, is that there are circles to this, right? There's the very local circle of your friends, and they might have inside references in language that people who are not your friends won't know. So if someone is listening to me have a conversation with my brother, even an American English speaker, 30% of the conversation will be a mystery to them. They will not understand what we're talking about. We grew up together. We have so many inside secret references that other people don't know that we know naturally. And when other people, Americans, English speakers, hear it, they go, what are you guys talking about? What is that? Right? So that's one level. That's one layer. So you're dealing with that as an English learner. You're hearing people also talk with people who are very close to them, and they have a circle of inside knowledge, right? Or inside jokes or inside whatever references that you don't know. Then it gets a little bigger. Then you might have your area. Maybe. Sometimes it's city-based. Certain people in a city have their own references. Maybe it's Californians, Southern California. There are cultures or subcultures or groups as well that are a little bigger than just a circle of friends, where you might have inside jokes or inside references too. Then it gets a little bigger. Let's say Americans. Okay, Americans, we have our own culture. We grow up in America, so we have a shared experience of the school system, shared experience of television programs, news programs, things that we watched as kids. I can reference something that I watched as a kid, like a cartoon, and I know that another American who's in my generation knows that same cartoon, and if I make a joke about it, I know they'll get it. But someone from the UK probably will not get it because they didn't see that as a kid. So that's another level. Then there's the generational part, where my parents don't understand a lot of what I'm talking about when I'm talking to people in my generation, and I don't understand what 15-year-olds are talking about. So you see, this is very complicated. There's a lot of things here, a lot of sort of circles that get bigger and bigger, and a lot of levels. The circles are friends and family, my subculture or my group or my region, my nation, my country, my cultural identity in my country. I am an American, a shared experience I have with Americans. Then there's generational, which is the sort of levels, right? There's my generation, which is millennials. We're called millennials. And there's Generation X, and there are many generations. We understand different things. We have our own inside jokes, memes, and things like that, right? Then there's an even bigger one, which is the English-speaking world, right? In the English-speaking world, maybe let's say that's native English speakers who know common things that are within the language that are pretty broad. That would include a lot of phrasal verbs. That would include a lot of idioms and expressions that are not specific to a country. We know many of them as native English speakers as part of our education, reading literature that's common to all native English speakers, maybe knowing things that are just sort of floating around in the language, not specific to a country. We share that. So when you come into the language to try to learn it and you say, why don't I understand? Don't say, you're talking too fast. That's why. Because it's not why. It might be 15%. But the rest of that giant 75% is something else, right? The 75. Wait, my math is wrong. I've been doing the wrong math the whole time. What am I saying? 85. What am I doing? My math is off. I'm an English teacher, not a math teacher. Don't ask me to do simple subtraction. How dare you? I think you understand what I mean. Let's say the biggest piece is the references, but it's not that simple. It's not like I need to learn all English references. I need to learn all idioms. No, you need to swim around in cultures. You need to understand that things are different generationally. You need to understand that even when you're a master of English, you will hear a conversation between two people who are close friends, and you still won't understand what is going on. And that's just part of it. And sometimes I watched an English video yesterday that someone sent me about some very in-depth topic. And after I watched the video, I said to them in a chat, I don't understand anything I just heard. I understood every word, but I don't understand what's going on because I don't know the background, the history, the industry, right? There's so much of that. So just jump in and swim around and don't come to me for math lessons. That's the lesson. That's the lesson. All right, guys, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe. And don't forget to check out my full courses in the links in the description. If you're interested in improving your English, that is where to go. I have full courses on how to think in English, improving your pronunciation, the flow between your words to sound more natural, a full 15-hour course on English in general, mastering native English, bunch of different courses, including 4 courses about English slang. Can learn over 200, I think it's 240 English expressions with in-depth explanations of each. Check out those courses in the links in the description.